currency is designed to be simple to transfer. That's nearly its entire purpose. Throughout most of recorded time, prosperity has been mobile for clear reasons. Coins fit inside pockets. Gold sits within safes. Paper slides into briefcases. Digital currency exists in databases nobody observes. The simpler currency is to relocate, the simpler it becomes to exchange. And the simpler it becomes to conceal, accumulate, control, or escape with. Every monetary framework you've experienced silently accepts this compromise. Liquidity purchases effectiveness. Effectiveness welcomes danger. However, on a modest island in the Pacific, inhabitants constructed a framework that dismissed this reasoning completely. An island where currency was so massive it couldn't be transported, so enormous it couldn't be concealed, so apparent that everyone perpetually understood who possessed what, and so fixed that robbery was nearly pointless. Welcome to Yap. This is the financial historian, where currency, authority, and history intersect, and nothing exists as straightforward as it appears. Yap represents a small island cluster in Micronesia, distant from significant trading paths, encompassed by open waters with zero natural metals, zero gold, zero silver, and zero clear materials appropriate for minting. For generations, Yap's inhabitants existed in comparative separation, constructing a sophisticated society without monarchs, without documented agreements, and without anything resembling contemporary currency. Instead, they utilized stone, not modest stones, not representative markers. Enormous limestone circles, some weighing multiple tons, carved with an opening in the middle, extracted hundreds of miles distant, conveyed across hazardous waters, and exhibited openly throughout settlements. These were designated Rai stones, and they operated as currency. Initially, the concept sounds nearly ridiculous. Why would anyone select a trading medium that can't move? Why construct prosperity from something you can't relocate? Why embrace a framework where exchanges don't require physical movement? Those inquiries overlook the essence, because Rai Stones Worked didn't originate from their practicality. It didn't originate from shortage alone. And it didn't originate from ownership in the manner contemporary economics comprehends it. Rai stones held worth because of what they symbolized: labor, peril, chronicle, and primarily, collective conviction. The limestone utilized to fashion them didn't occur on Yap. They originated chiefly from Palau, an island hundreds of miles distant. Obtaining a stone demanded arranging an expedition, navigating open waters in delicate canoes, bargaining with external communities, extracting the stone manually, shaping it, and subsequently conveying it back across the waters. Individuals perished accomplishing this. Canoes capsized, teams were lost, and the more hazardous the voyage, the superior the worth of the stone that endured it. This reveals the initial crucial understanding. Worth wasn't allocated at the journey's conclusion. It gathered throughout the narrative. The stone itself mattered less than the account connected to it. Who authorized it? Who navigated for it? Who perished obtaining it? Which tempests it survived? These particulars were recalled collectively, transmitted verbally, and consented upon socially. The island operated as a living registry. Everyone understood the stone's chronicle. Everyone understood which ones mattered more and why. And once a stone reached Yap, something unusual occurred. It ceased relocating. Rai stones were positioned in prominent positions, beside trails, outside residences, along settlement boundaries. Possession could alter without the stone ever being contacted. A household could compensate a marriage price, resolve a conflict, recognize an obligation, convey inheritance, all without shifting the stone an inch. The exchange was communal, not physical. The community merely revised its collective comprehension of who possessed what. Rai stones weren't utilized to purchase fish, instruments, or daily provisions. Everyday existence functioned on exchange, mutual aid, and modest trades. Rai stones weren't pocket currency. They were utilized for occasions that carried enduring repercussions: marriages, inheritance, recompense after serious conflicts, partnerships between families. In contemporary terminology, they operated less like cash and more like property documentation or government securities. Consider a massive stone positioned beside a settlement path. Everyone understands it belongs to one household. When a marriage is organized, possession transfers to another household. But the stone doesn't relocate. Nobody shifts it away. Nobody secures it. What transforms is the collective comprehension. From that instant on, everyone consents the stone now belongs to someone different. That consensus is the exchange. The stone is merely the foundation that maintains memory. Truthful, you couldn't steal a Rai stone and claim it was yours. Everyone understood where it originated. Everyone understood its narrative. Everyone understood who possessed it previously. Robbery demanded consensus, and consensus couldn't be fabricated quietly. There existed zero anonymity, zero secrecy, zero private accumulation. Prosperity existed in public observation, reinforced by recollection rather than power. The framework also reformed conduct in manners contemporary currency rarely accomplishes. Because prosperity was apparent, standing mattered. Because possession was communal, accountability followed. Because stones couldn't be concealed, authority couldn't be quietly gathered without examination. The framework discouraged reckless gathering and rewarded steadiness. Prosperity wasn't a tool. It was an indicator of participation, confidence, and continuation. And this is where the narrative ceases being unusual anthropology and begins becoming discomforting. Because despite how unusual Rai stones appear, the reasoning underneath them isn't alien whatsoever. It's actually nearer to contemporary finance than most individuals desire to acknowledge. Possession without physical control. Worth separated from material utility. Prosperity established by collective conviction rather than inherent operation. The inhabitants of Yap didn't miscomprehend currency. They comprehended it too thoroughly to claim it concerned objects. They constructed a framework where currency couldn't be stolen because it couldn't be secretly possessed, where inflation was limited by communal recollection, where confidence wasn't theoretical. It was reinforced by transparency, and for an extended period, it operated. However, frameworks constructed on collective conviction possess one critical weakness. They don't fracture when resources vanish. They fracture when conviction does. And that conviction was about to be examined, not by avarice or deception, but by something far more destabilizing. An external framework that asserted to be more productive, more contemporary, and more logical. What rendered the stone currency of Yap extraordinary wasn't merely that it existed, it was how efficiently it influenced conduct. Because once prosperity is communal, motivations transform. In most monetary frameworks, gathering occurs quietly. Holdings are concealed behind accounts, structures, intermediaries. Danger constructs invisibly. In Yap, prosperity sat in obvious sight that transparency functioned as a discipline stronger than regulation. If you maintained a large Rai stone, you didn't merely possess prosperity, you carried anticipation. You were anticipated to behave responsibly, to participate in communal responsibilities, to settle conflicts equitably. Accumulating wasn't respected, it was doubtful. Displaying prosperity without communal participation didn't enhance position, it diminished it. Authority wasn't something you could quietly obtain. It had to be validated continuously through conduct. Conflicts were managed the same manner. There were zero courts in the contemporary understanding, zero documented agreements to contest. There was something arguably more efficient: collective recollection. When an exchange transpired, the community observed it. When possession transformed, the community recognized it. If a disagreement emerged, it wasn't an issue of extracting documents from a container. It was an issue of consensus. Who did everyone consent possessed what and why? This signified that deception, as we comprehend it currently, was nearly impossible to expand. You couldn't counterfeit possession records because there were zero private records to counterfeit. You couldn't quietly duplicate spend a stone because its possession was widespread knowledge. You couldn't control the framework in separation. Every attempt to deceive demanded persuading everyone else, which is substantially harder than exploiting documentation or programming. Paradoxically, the non-existence of official reinforcement generated stronger reinforcement, and subsequently there was movement, or rather the absence of it. Rai weren't intended for rapid trading. You didn't purchase daily requirements with them. They were utilized for significant infrequent exchanges. This restricted their movement, which consequently restricted speculation. You couldn't exchange a stone impulsively. Prosperity relocated slowly, purposefully, and with outcome. That slowness wasn't a defect, it was a characteristic. Contemporary monetary frameworks prize velocity. Capital relocates in milliseconds. Markets respond immediately. And while that productivity generates expansion, it also generates vulnerability. Yap's framework exchanged velocity for steadiness. By rendering prosperity cumbersome, it diminished volatility. By rendering exchanges apparent, it diminished exploitation. By fixing worth to collective narrative, it diminished alarm. There's a quiet paradox here. The inhabitants of Yap constructed a monetary framework without documentation, without mathematics, without metal, and without centralized power, and still succeeded to resolve difficulties that contemporary frameworks struggle with daily. Confidence, responsibility, deception prevention, long-term steadiness. However, zero framework exists in isolation. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, European colonial authorities reached Micronesia. German administrators, followed later by Japanese and American powers, encountered the Rai stones and attempted to comprehend them through a Western perspective. They observed large rocks positioned outside settlements and struggled to understand how this could operate as currency. To them, the framework appeared ineffective, illogical, primitive. Therefore, they accomplished what contemporary institutions frequently accomplish when confronted with unfamiliar frameworks. They enhanced. Colonial powers documented stones, measured them, cataloged possession, and critically they began introducing new stones utilizing contemporary instruments. What once demanded hazardous sea voyages and enormous human labor could now be accomplished rapidly, inexpensively, and safely with steel instruments and vessels. Stones inundated the island from a Western viewpoint. This appeared like advancement, expanded availability, diminished expense, enhanced productivity. From Yap's viewpoint, it was inflation. Not inflation in the theoretical understanding, but inflation of significance. New stones didn't transport the same narratives. They didn't symbolize sacrifice or danger. They didn't incorporate recollection, and because they lacked narrative weight, they weakened the framework's reliability. Even worse, colonial governance undermined the communal reinforcement system. Power shifted externally. Choices were no longer settled purely within the community. External frameworks began superseding internal consensus. Once confidence migrated away from collective recollection and toward imposed governance, the stones lost their foundation operation. The framework didn't disintegrate in uprising or disorder. It merely ceased operating as intended, and this is the critical instruction. The stone currency of Yap didn't fail because it was illogical. It failed because it encountered a framework that refused to acknowledge what actually provided it worth. Western administrators observed objects. They overlooked conviction. They observed ineffectiveness. They overlooked steadiness. Contemporary currency is nearer to Rai stones than gold, and what its beneficial authority. And yet, we rarely acknowledge it. Your financial balance isn't something you maintain. It's a figure everyone consents exists. Government securities aren't supported by metal. They're supported by confidence. Digital currency doesn't relocate physically. Possession revises in registries. Exchanges settle because frameworks recognize them, not because objects transform hands. The distinction is that contemporary frameworks conceal this reality behind intricacy. Yap didn't. Its inhabitants comprehended something essential. Currency is a communal innovation. It operates when conviction is collective, when possession is transparent, and when motivations synchronize conduct with steadiness. When conviction diminishes, zero quantity of material support can rescue it. The genuine danger in monetary frameworks isn't robbery, it's disbelief. Because when individuals cease consenting on what constitutes worth, what constitutes possession, and what constitutes legitimacy, frameworks don't require to be attacked to fail. They merely unravel. The stone currency of Yap compels us to confront an discomforting truth. Currency has never concerned what it's manufactured of. It has perpetually concerned who confides it and why. And once you observe that, it becomes substantially harder to claim contemporary frameworks are protected. History doesn't replicate, but motivations accomplish. When currency becomes faster than comprehension, when frameworks expand larger than confidence, and when conviction is sustained through reassurance instead of responsibility, steadiness becomes theatrical. It appears solid until it isn't. The instruction Yap leaves behind isn't nostalgic or anti-contemporary. It's structural. Financial independence doesn't originate from pursuing superior objects of worth. It originates from comprehending the frameworks that allocate worth initially, and understanding when conviction is being stretched excessively. Currency will perpetually be massive in one understanding or another. Either it weighs on the framework or it weighs on the individuals who don't comprehend it. If this provided you a new viewpoint, hit subscribe. History possesses the answers. I'll demonstrate you where to look.